Jamie and Ambassador Huntsman for joining us today. We appreciate it. I promise I'll keep the questions high level. We won't have any hard questions today. But I know everyone out there in Utah is so excited to have you and just your thoughts and your candor today. So thank you for sharing that with us. So before we get started and dive in, last year was just unprecedented. We'd never seen anything like it. And I would love to hear your thoughts and reflections on last year. And Jamie, if we could start with you, and then Jon, that would be fantastic.
Sure. So welcome, everybody. Thrilled to be here. Jon, thank you very much for doing this. Jon, as you know, is a great American patriot. Took two of the toughest jobs you can do, which is trying to build good relations with China and Russia. And it was the word unprecedented is not being misused here. It was unprecedented between COVID, the unbelievable presidential election, the murder of innocent black people. No one expected a global shutdown of any type. It was unprecedented. Governments took unprecedented action appropriately. Appropriately, they did it. I mean, it's shockingly, the American government did it in 3 or 4 weeks, which normally takes 2 or 3 years. And of course, it's sloppy, and you can criticize some of the stuff they did, but it was important. And governments around the world did that: fiscal, monetary policy, et cetera. It was amazing that all of these companies can go back, send a lot of people home to work, with their training kits and all the kits we had to do, and that was pretty neat. But it also isolated to me that maybe the most important thing is the inadequacy of America competently doing its job right. So in this downturn, usually in a recession, the job losses are across the income spectrum. In this recession, it was all in the bottom 20, 30%. And the racial inequality that was highlighted by George Floyd's murder was highlighted, it's been there for hundreds of years. And so we have not done a good job in the education systems, inner city schools, infrastructure, proper regulation, because if you don't get regulation right, you're not going to fix infrastructure, healthcare, opioids, you name it. We've actually damaged America over the last 20 years with bad policies, and I think these things just highlighted it. I mean, we were not prepared for a pandemic. We've not been building the systems we need for health and infrastructure, and but hopefully some of that stuff will get fixed going forward.
Hey, Kristen, it's a great pleasure to be with you and Miles, and it's such an honor to be with Jamie, for whom I have untold respect. Truly one of the great corporate leaders in the world. And when Jamie listens, or when he speaks, people listen. I think the last year has really exposed the vulnerabilities around our nation and our ability to deal with the crisis. And this is something that really needs to be used as a learning experience, whether it's from a healthcare standpoint, whether it's from a social inequality standpoint, from a governance of city standpoint. So you could say it was the worst year imaginable. And I guess for me, it's the first thing in life I've ever experienced that was so large and comprehensive in scope that it impacted everything from my personal life right on through to global events. And there are very few things in life that you ever encounter that have that kind of sweeping impact. So when I say it was the worst year ever, it may be the most important year we've had in a very long while. We've learned how to be resilient as human beings. It's a year to let go of goals and expectations, which many of us had at the beginning of the year. We learned to Zoom. We became teachers, babysitters, and chefs. We've learned patience, tolerance, and love. I mean, these are all the things at a personal level. And we learned how much more we can do with less of. So we now realize how much we've overcomplicated life. And my hope is as we go forward that we'll reflect on so many of these lessons from a personal perspective, but also from a regional, national, and a global perspective, because there's room to sync up our level of coordination around these kinds of emergencies. And heaven forbid it happens again, although we seem to be on the century cycle when it comes to pandemics. We're better prepared and able at the human level and at the government level and at the business level.
Now, that's great. Thank you for sharing that. I think 2 words come to mind are, adaptability and resiliency. And we certainly saw that in the last year. Just despite, we talked about the challenges last year, the positives. We all found new hobbies. We spent more time with our family. I think it was interesting, Jamie, the financial system didn't even break, right? we had certain corporate sectors that outperformed. You know, there was so much certainty and fear, but certain corporate sectors continued to thrive. And how do you think we completely avoided a financial meltdown and catastrophe?
So, I mean, John, I agree with everything that John said. And there's a little beautiful thing that happened, like in New York City at 7 p.m. every night. If you opened up your window, you would hear, and you could hear it across the city, everyone clapping, banging pots, thanking our essential workers. And it was a beautiful thing. I mean, it literally could bring tears to your eyes, and you could hear it, but the decibels were unbelievable. And maybe we learned that all workers are always essential. You know, the sanitation, nurses, emergency work, well, they didn't become all essential, and so hopefully that respect, and John, I agree with you, hopefully that respect transcends, well, you know, the government's took I think the big banks would have been fine no matter what, but it is definitely true, the government, through unemployment insurance, stimulus checks, the Federal Reserve, by just opening up the financing spigot, kept markets wide open, and of course, companies took huge advantage of that. So we had more debt issuance, equity issuance, in the 12 months after COVID than at any other time in history. Spreads came way in, and if the Fed not done that, that might not have happened. We might have added a financial crisis to basically a very quick, deep recession. And so all of those things helped. They were not done to help banks or big businesses. And so you're absolutely correct. You know, the economy kept going along, but that had life support. I think the very important thing is there was some permanent scarring. So think of small businesses that closed, that will not open. People who've been unemployed for over a certain amount of period, it always shows that they have a hard time getting back to the workforce. So we still have to fix some of those things. And I totally agree with John. I hope there are a lot of lessons learned. We could do it better as a nation to help all of our people.
John, do you have a key takeaway for